Yo, welcome to the Red Road East. I'm your host, Fierce Truth Seeker. The Red Road East is an indigenous TV program dedicated to archiving and preserving the history, legacy, and culture of indigenous Americans east of the Mississippi River and the Caribbean. Today's show, I have a treat for you coming all the way from New Jersey, the TurtleGang, Lenape Nation. And today's topic is going to be the African burial ground, or is it an indigenous American burial site? And today, I have from the TurtleGang, Norris Francis.
Pleased to meet you, bro.
Yo. All right. And Silent Hawk. Yeah. Good to have y'all, brothers.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's definitely a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Tell me, who are the Lenape?
The Lenape would be the original inhabitants of the land affectionately called Lenape Hoking, which would be all of New Jersey, the 5 boroughs, eastern Pennsylvania, and northern Delaware. Now, the term Lenape Hoking would be considered a colonial term, more or less.
Okay.
But it references that territory.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, because I know they have different branches of the Lenape.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, can you give a little brief distinction, how you distinguish between those different ones, like from where y'all come from? What distinguishes your particular?
Well, we would be the Unami branch.
Okay.
Do you want to go in on it?
Unami branch is basically the southern region of New Jersey.
Okay.
Where we speak that language, and it's a location.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Then the northern branch would be like the Muncie,
Yeah.
and then you have a mixture of the two, which would be the Unalatico, which would be more or less, where the two came together, intermixed, and formed a slightly different dialect, you know what I mean? But it's still the same people, you know what I mean?
Okay. And how are you two related to, or how do y'all fit in lineage-wise to the Lenape?
Okay, well, obviously this is my cousin.
Okay.
We have so many connections to the Lenape Nation through various grandmothers, grandfathers, you know what I mean? Like, all throughout our history as we travel back, we have people marrying Lenape, we have Lenape ancestors, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to sit here and portray ourselves as being people who are of full blood descent. You know, everybody in our family is Lenape. You know, we're a mixture, we have Irish in us, we have obviously African in us, but we come from a family that its foundation is the Lenape Nation. And we're one of the 3 families in our territory where we're from, Red Bank, that can trace our history back to the Lenape.
Wow. Yeah. Well, your story is not unique. I think that, is pretty much universal tribe-wise. I don't think there's pretty much any tribe that, hasn't been absorbed by the European settlers when they came here, and there's be different influences, but that's pretty much universal.
Yeah, we've spent some time intermixing with various groups that entered into our territory, but like we like to think, or the position we have is these people came into our territories, you know what I mean? So they intermix with us. So whatever different bloodlines we have flowing through us, they came and experienced our culture and lived amongst us, and we absorbed them into our cultures. Right. You know what I mean? So a lot of the characteristics, a lot of the culture, a lot of the way we live, its foundation is Lenape. You know, especially here in New York City, New Jersey, and the areas we mentioned. So, yeah.
Yeah. What do you say to those who have like a stereotype, about what Native Americans are supposed to look like, or should I say Aboriginal Americans are supposed to look like?
Well, if you really are interested in finding out the process that brought about the different phenotypes, you'd have to do a real comprehensive research on the history, and you'll find out that there were different stages in the development of the Lenape people, right? So the people that we have come to know as the typical Native Americans are a product of the colonial times. So they're a product of the mixing that was going on from other tribes who were fleeing into the area, Europeans, and Africans. You know what I mean? So you have a mixture of a people that produced a certain phenotype. And that is the more recent phenotype that the European encountered. So these would be the people that he uses or demonstrates as being the prototypical. But when you go back into history and you look into the descriptions of the indigenous people, you will find that they were closer to what we would call Negro than what we would call the Western Plains Indians. And we like to let people know we are not the Western Plains Indians. So to look at us and compare us to them is really unfair to us and to who the majority of the people in the Eastern Woodlands are. You know what I mean? It's really unfair. We're not those people, and we don't claim to be those people. We're very different.
Right.
So, but we don't get into those arguments because we know our genealogy, we know our lineage, we know our truth. You know what I mean? So we move forward trying to galvanize our people and get back into the cultures and the expressions that we are proud of and that that got us this far. So,
How far can you all trace your lineage?
We can trace our lineage back to the times of colonization. You know what I mean? Our family is on record going back. 1664 is the year that the English, more or less, came into the area and started receiving, land and buying land and deeds, and that matter land was being sold to the English. Prior to that, it was the Dutch. We can trace ourselves back to these original times, and our great-great-grandfather and the work he did, he traced us back to 1619, which would predate even a lot of what we call the slave trade that came into New Jersey. So, we have a very, our documented history is solid. We're not some people that are just up here making claims and can't substantiate it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Our family is documented. There's been books written about us, countless articles, and even the people in our territory know who we are.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that, because, you always have, like a lot of times when I put the shows on social media, you have a lot of people, who say all kind of, these trolls, always say, they're not this and they're not that, about my guests and stuff, and even about, myself, and they don't know any of us from a can of beans, but yet they're going to say, like they actually know your lineage.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that someone would tell you what your history is, and the thing is, I see a lot of people on social media denying their African lineage, some denying their European lineage. We don't do that. We know we have intermixed. Our family was actually, our great-great-grandfather's farm was actually a station for the Underground Railroad. And where we're from, our family, carries many names, Scobeyville, Pine Brook, Colts Neck, Falls, this area. This is the area that a lot of the runaway slaves, and when we say runaway slaves, we're not just speaking on Africans, we're speaking on indigenous people that were enslaved, and they fled up north, and they came directly through our property, sought refuge with us. Some settled in the area, and were absorbed into the remainder of the tribe that was still here.
Hold that thought, because you're jumping ahead a little bit, because I'm about to touch on that with the topic, because I'm letting this lead up into. So just hold off on that for a second. So you can definitely, you're recognized in your community, and you can trace your lineage going back to 1619. And you also say you've also been able to trace your lineage to an African tribe as well. That's what
No,
you're
no,
saying?
no. We haven't traced our lineage to an African tribe. We just don't. We know the history of our people and the territory we come from, and we know that many runaway slaves settled in our area and intermixed with the various Lenape and Cherokee families. So we personally have not traced our family, a portion of our family, to any African tribe. We just don't discount that and say, no, we're not. I'm sure we have some African in us. You know what I mean? I don't doubt that. We just have not, we have not located it.
Okay.
But that's not what's paramount to us, because the territory we live in would be a Lenape territory. The territory our family was reared in for hundreds of years is Lenape territory. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of other things that we can show and prove to verify who we are, but we're kind of beyond that at this point. We're not trying to prove anything to people. We're trying to move forward and galvanize our family and return to the the greatness we once achieved before as these families. So.
And the reason why I was asking about tracing your history to a particular African tribe is because the topic of the show is the African burial ground, or indigenous or Aboriginal American burial site.
Yeah.
Because I know that a lot of people, a lot of indigenous people had been reclassified as Africans, and a lot of them were not. And when the census takers came around, but if they had dark skin, they would label them as African. So I know that the African burial ground, you have the site over in Lower Manhattan, and you also have this other one here in Upper Manhattan.
Yes.
Y'all know, can y'all expound a little bit on that particular history?
Well, ironic thing about that is our family has multiple burial grounds where we're from in Jersey, right? And those same burial grounds are classified as African American burial grounds. And we absolutely know that these burial grounds are Lenape burial grounds. So this was common, you know what I mean?
So your family was reclassified as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Those of us who didn't remove and didn't relocate, in order to stay in the territory, we had to accept the reclassification. Our uncle, who was a great historian, he was a writer. He had one of the first quote unquote African American newspapers in our area. You know what I mean? Documented much of our history. You know what I mean? He's on record, saying and demonstrating who we are. You know what I mean? He basically has documented all of our history, him going on through his father and the generation before him. And all these people are buried in these cemeteries that are now called African American cemeteries. And as I said before, they were absolutely Lenape cemeteries, tied into the Sand Hill Band Lenape, tied into the various Navasink tribes that occupied the area. So yeah, that's definitely a situation that we've encountered. We've been reclassified, but as I said, we have the documentation, everything to show and prove who we are. So in terms of the burial grounds that you find here in New York, it's a lot of the same thing. They originate as Lenape burial grounds, and then over time, Africans are buried in the burial grounds with them, and they become known as African burial grounds. So it's not that there's not Africans there. It's just that's not the origin of those burial grounds, and that's more or less what's been going on all throughout the territory.
Right, because I remember when they were first discovered, you had some indigenous people that were saying, well, these are not just Africans that were buried there, and so a lot of people were concerned about that particular situation. Absolutely. Because a lot of people are under the assumption that, you know, the dark-skinned phenotype is just exclusive to Africa, you know, and, you know, they were dark-skinned people, you know, all over the planet, you know, like
all
the
over
Australian
the planet,
Aborigines, you know, the different Melanesians, you know, Polynesians, Hawaiians, you know, all over the planet. You had dark-skinned people, you know, and so the reason why I brought up this topic is because, you know, a lot of us, you know, had been reclassified. I know it happened in my family on certain lineages, you know, they were reclassified, you know. You would see on one particular document, it would say colored, and then they would change it to Negro, you know, and it's happened, you know, all over, particularly on the East Coast, you know.
And all of those would be descriptions. They're not nationalities. They don't identify the culture of the people. They don't identify who these people are. They're classifications. So even when you understand what these terms mean, you know, they're not speaking to a people. They're speaking to a description of these people.
Exactly.
So yeah, we definitely have suffered from that in terms of the cultures, what's going on here in these territories. Everything was of the indigenous people, from the roads to the foods we're eating, to the, you know, the where the subways run, you know what I mean, where the ferry back and forth. These were all established by the indigenous people, just like these cemeteries. You know what I mean? So you have an overlay of cultures that came in and started to walk in the same paths we walked. And that became known as Broadway, which was the, how would we say it? The Mohican, Mohawken Trail is what we call Broadway. And that goes all the way up to Canada. You know what I mean? So the mainstays of the culture here in New York, New Jersey, pretty much everywhere in the United States was already established by the indigenous people. So to suggest anything is this or that, before it was an African burial ground, it was an indigenous burial ground. And we had no problem with our African relatives being buried there with us. You know what I mean? So over time it was reclassified and everything comes to be known as colored or African or whatever the term is, but you can't exclude the original people who occupied the land and the contributions they made. And that's what has happened over time. So everybody's more comfortable saying African, saying this or that, because, you know, certain laws were passed that you couldn't develop land if there were still Indians around. So the Indians that remained had to be reclassified as colored or Negro or African. So.
Yeah, you're right. And do y'all, as far as like perpetuating the culture, do y'all, is the language still being spoken?
Well, Kyler right here, he's leading the way in bringing back the language for our particular family group. So yeah, he could better answer these questions in terms of how we're bringing back the language to our family.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, basically I'm just trying to learn the language. I study up with the Ramapo, learning some of the Munsee language. We're Unami, we're Unami and Munsee, so I kind of want to learn both of the dialects to bring it back to the family. And you know, once you speak it, it's kind of like bringing it back to life. So that's all I'm trying to do, and then teach the younger generation.
Oh, beautiful.
See, part of the trade-off in being able to maintain your home was you had to give up your culture.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of the ones that migrated west were able to keep their culture, but they lost their land. You know, they were able to keep the spoken aspect of the culture, the ceremony, but you know, the important part of culture is the agriculture, you know what I mean, the home life, being in tune with the land you live on. So our people chose to stay and continue that aspect of the culture, being known as farmers and you know, things of that nature, whereas other groups relocated. So it was a trade-off. We stayed in our tribal homelands, got reclassified, but we kept the wealth of our actual, you know, the part of the culture that feeds the people, that allows us to sustain a way of life. You know what I mean? So that was the trade-off. So at this point, you know, we're trying to bring that back to our family, starting with our family. That's what's most important to us.
You made a good point there, because a lot of our brothers, sisters out west are not familiar with that history, you know, as far as us remaining here on the East Coast and being reclassified. You know, they're like totally clueless about that history, you know. And also, I meant was to ask you too, have y'all been part of the pipeline support for the Dakota pipeline issue?
Obviously the Delaware, who represent the vast majority of the nation that we would be, the Lenape, they're very involved in the whole, in what's going on out there. But ironically, long before all this took place, there's a pipeline issue happening right here in New Jersey.
And that was my next question.
Yeah.
Have the you all had any of the people from out west to support you all with that particular issue?
I personally can't attest to that, but I know that our the Sandhill Band Lenape Cherokee, who is one of the only remaining tribal government, uninterrupted. You know, they are descendants. We are descendants of the original Lenape from New Jersey, whereas a lot of the other groups have migrated into the area, right? So the Sandhill stood in opposition to the Tennessee pipeline, which is the actual pipeline that we, as a tribe, has been fighting for years. You know what I mean? We stood in opposition to it long before what was going on in Standing Rock. So, you know, it's a lot of political things going on. Obviously, you know that. It's a lot, you know, we support people. Do we get the support from them? I can't necessarily say we do, you know what I mean? But it's been a fight for our people here for quite some time to maintain what's going on here.
Well, hopefully this show that we're doing now will bring some attention to that, you know, to our brothers and sisters, you know, out west, and, you know, that way it could be, you know, a mutual thing, you know, as far as, you know, support in that particular struggle.
Yes.
You know. I want to also talk about another topic. There's recently been like a lot of talk in the quote-unquote conscious community, or an attack rather, on the American Aborigines that look like us. And I know that recently there has been like a little bit of information coming from like some of our very well-known scholars. Well, one particular, like I know Professor Smalls was, you know, dealing with that too. But I know that he also said that he had indigenous ancestry as well.
Yep. He was very clear on it too.
Right, right.
Yeah, very clear.
And also mentioned that at one time it wasn't, you know, it wasn't really popular, so he was afraid.
Yeah,
you
he
know,
kept his mouth quiet.
Yeah, because you know of the backlash that he would get, you know, from other people. You know. Yeah. You want to like contribute any ideas of your own that may clear up any information that's coming from the conscious, quote-unquote, conscious community?
At this point, what's going on in the conscious community, it's spun off into a whole nother diatribe of misinformation. And at this point, they're being forced to deal with some of this real information that's coming at them. Thus, you have Dr. Smalls speaking up, But you've always had people like Hiawatha, Booker T. Coleman. He spoke on his indigenous heritage. I mean, you've had different teachers speak about it, but it's just not something that's been embraced by the conscious community. But it's being force-fed to them now. They're having to deal with it, and it's shaking things up, So personally, I'm just interested to see how it plays out. I've kind of been in the background. I'm a videographer. I've filmed lectures, so I've been in the conscious community for quite some time, and I've been speaking in the background to the people, having conversations. It's just not something they want to put to the forefront, but they're very aware of the conversations being had. It's some brothers out there that are bringing this truth to the forefront.
Yeah, big time.
They're just resisting it. But it's getting to a point where they're going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to,
exactly. Because realistically, most people that look like us, if you ask them to do a genealogy study of their families, they'll all say, they had an ancestor that was indigenous. But if you ask them to trace their lineage to somebody from Africa or came over on the slave ship, it's a rare occasion when I find one that can do that. They're giving us the wrap now, so we have to wrap up the show. But man, it was a pleasure having you guys on here, man. I mean, it's been me and your cousin had been talking about it for a while, and he hit me up the other day and said, when we gonna be on? I said, okay, when y'all ready. All right, so I thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. And we got to do this again.
Yes, sir.
Okay, folks, man, man, we're having so much fun here, and unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. But, I'm going to take y'all out with some music, and we're going to say for now, Doda da, Gon Hon E.